I have a notation that item number 52 is going to be canceled. Summary number 24828. Moved by Councilwoman Van Branken to cancel. Second. Yes.
I do know that there are some folks in the audience that said that they came today, and even though they acknowledged that we're going to cancel it, that they had some thoughts I think they wanted to express. So.
Okay. We'll be welcome to do that. At this time, we'll have the public hearing on summary number 24828. Anyone wishing to speak in the audience relative to item number 52, please step forward at this time. Ma'am, if you just state your name for the record, please. Thank you.
Howard?
If you don't mind, if you could pull the mic toward you so we can... There you go. Thanks.
My name is Gail Howard. I would like to address the council with respect to your intent to roll back the drainage department millage, a department which 100% of its residents depend. On the surface, you might say you are doing the residents of Jefferson Parish a favor with this rollback, when in fact it's actually done harm. Roads and homes taking on water during heavy rains is not a good trade-off for the minuscule reduction in taxes. It seems this council has no problems asking its residents to reach deeper in its pockets for money for, say, the recreation department, a department which does not impact 100% of its residents. My elderly neighbor, who on most days can't even walk out of his front door, derives no benefit from an air-conditioned gym or a newly installed bike path or an upgraded bathroom at some playground. But he is, however, along with thousands more, required to pay for it. He is, however, concerned about drainage and the canal behind his house being properly maintained. A number of projects have been kicked down the road for decades due to a lack of funding. If this millage was fully assessed as voted on by the residents of this parish, much of this work would have already been completed. This includes regular maintenance of the system, needed upgrades where deficiencies exist, and yes, the long overdue repair of those structures which failed decades ago. I respectfully ask this council to reconsider its intent to retain the rollback on the drainage millage. The residents of this parish voted on the 6 mills for a reason. Please honor their request and fund the drainage department to the full extent. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? Yes. Sir, if you'd just state your name for the record, please. Thank you.
I am Albert Kellecker, and I want to speak regarding the millage that I think is 4.6 right now, about going up to 6 mills. I believe in December last year we had an election that came up. The results of the election were 72% in favor of the 6% millage rate, only 28% against. I believe the voters knew exactly what they were voting on. They realized that we could go from 4.6 to 6. And if we did do that, take a $200,000 house, for instance, take off whatever the homestead exemption is, and this 1.4% increase would amount to, what, $15-20 a year? That's less than 50 cents a week. If you take a look at what this tax would be for one person to pay or one family, as opposed to what the cost would pay to get an inch of water in your house, to me, it's silly. You've got to have that flood protection. A nice example might be our friends to the east here and what's happened in Orleans Parish. Every time it rains, it seems like. We've got a really good flood protection drainage program going on now, thanks to Mitch Terrio. I don't believe we can stay stagnant with this. I believe we got to keep ahead of the problem, and I believe that this minimal millage increase is the way to go. Thank you.
Sir, if you'd just state your name for the record.
Al Morella, 4260 East Loyola Drive, 5th District, Kenner, 4th District, Unincorporated, Jefferson, 45 years. This millage, 464, 6 mills. Once again, I'm opposed. The voters spoke at the polls, reassess it at 464. And is that the case? I see people shaking their head. Is that the case, Chris? Did the voters vote to reassess it at 464?
6.
It was on the ballot at 6. There were public meetings where at certain times discussions were made about at what level it would be collected at. So the conflict exists between at what levels it would be collected at and at what amount appeared on the ballot as to whether or not we would keep the rate the same as to what was previously collected. So there is a difference of opinion as to those two things. That's where we find ourselves right now with that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Chris. What was the incentive to reassess it down to 464 from 6? What was the basis for that?
Because of the fact that property values had gone up, so therefore the amount that 4.64 mills would collect ultimately and net to the parish would have equaled what was previously being collected by that millage. So you were keeping the amount that was being collected the same.
Okay.
The dollar amount.
Okay. One more thing. All of y'all know how I feel about millages, new millages, increase in millages. You all know how I feel. Now, I think what we need, and I appreciate what these people here are saying about flooding. First of all, the flooding in New Orleans didn't have anything to do with the money that the people were paying. It was due to incompetence at the Sewage and Water Board. So let's get that straight right now.
Well, they managed to find $60 million in the last 2 months, so
that's right.
Why they didn't spend it, I don't know.
It had nothing to do with money. It was incompetence on their part. So I say this, before this millage stays at 6, I think that the voters of Jefferson Parish and the taxpayers need some accountability. Why it shouldn't be at 464 and should be set at 6. I think we need some accountability. Bring us some figures and show us why it needs to why it needs to go back to 6. Till then, I'm opposed to it going back to 6. I want to see it stay at 464. Anybody got any comments and questions? Give us some accountability, man. That's all you have to do. I've been saying that for years. Show us what you're doing with the money we're paying now, and then show us where you got rid of all of the waste in this government. I'm not talking about just some waste. I'm talking about all of it. There's a lot of waste in this government. You can count on that. I think show us that, man. Until you can show us that.
I think the proof is in the streets. I think that we've survived these past couple of events due to the credit of our drainage department and the engineers that figure out the best way to improve our infrastructure. We have a quality infrastructure system. This council passes legislation every council meeting enhancing and improving our drainage system. It seems to be everybody's priority. So to question, accountability when it comes to the drainage department and our infrastructure, I think the proof is evident every day. 2 things you said, that this is a new millage. It's not a new millage. It's a renewal of an existing millage. And it's not an increase. The voters voted to put it back to 6 mills where it was. That was the original authorized rate.
Okay, well, thank you, Keith. But I still think we need more accountability. Anybody else? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yes.
Mr. Palmatier, can you tell, for the record, how much additional revenue would the parish gain by keeping it at the 6 mills versus the 4.6, please?
$45 million over 10 years.
Over 10 years. So if you give a rough estimate, Mr. President, what do you think the total overall drainage, this is a wide question, but overall drainage needs money would be? How much money do you think you need to repair?
Over $100 million. Mitch Terrio has provided lists to the council of projects throughout all of Jefferson Parish. He has a wish list of over $100 million.
So if
there are 40 million, Councilman, vital projects that need to.
So if it would be approved, it would take more than 10 years to accumulate the $100 million to fix all the problems that are in place. And by the time the 10 years is up, there'll be another $25 million of additional, and actually probably more than that, that'll need repairs by that time. So catch up would be pretty difficult.
It would, and that's why we explore the avenue, talking to our financial advisors, of doing bonding that money out and being able to yield about $30 million up front to do much needed repairs to the drainage system and enhancements to certain areas.
I just wanted to ask those questions for the record so people that were here speaking in favor and opposition would know the dollar amount that we would be either getting and how long it would take and what we have to do to fix all the stuff that needs repair. Thank you.
Councilman Rizzo, let me add to that in saying that some action was taken at the last council meeting by Councilwoman Lee Shang to do an overall evaluation of where parish finances exist as a whole. When the council that I served on back in 2004, when we first came in, parish investment accounts were somewhere in the neighborhood of about $400 million. That now is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $800+ million. So the point being made is that we need to do an assessment overall of revenue that we're receiving, where our needs are, determine whether or not some areas may be overfunded, some areas may be underfunded, and before collecting at the full rate, make a determination as to whether or not we can meet these needs through existing revenues. I don't have the answer to that. I think that this is the right step to take in order to try and make that determination, and it's going to place us all in a much better position to know where we actually stand to be able to make these decisions as we move forward. So my appreciation is that this 6 mills that could be collected at 6 mills at any point in time during the 10 years that the millage is authorized. So that being said, the sooner that we get underway of doing this comprehensive review and answering these questions, the better off I believe that we're going to be.
Jim, just to respond back, what you said is to these people who came and spoke favorable of it, if we can help, I think the gentleman, the lady mentioned that it would cost $15 or $20 a year. If we could not charge the $15 or $20 to somebody and we could get the money that we already have someplace else, why do we, some people may be able to afford the $15, some people may not, and that may be suffering on hard times or fixed incomes. So if we can fix it some other way and not roll the millage forward to do that, that may be the way to explore. Unfortunately, I won't be here. I know Mr. Impostado will be here, so hopefully that can be worked out. But that's my stance has been, if we can figure out how to fix it without having to charge anybody $10, $20, $30, or $50, that's the plan. I know Councilwoman Van Rankin, that's her issue, to fix a bunch of things, and if we can do it that way, I'm sure she would be applicable to do that.
And if I can add, Council Chairman, as well, because the 3 residents that came to speak today, I know we're familiar with, because they have been some of the most patient residents in Jefferson Parish. When I voted for this drainage millage to go to the max authorized by 72% of the voters, originally it was with them in mind, and that was the one instance in particular that I cited, because these folks that have joined us today literally have the backyards of their homes falling into our drainage canal. Mm-hmm. And so we have issues that they have been more than patient with us to try and solve over a number of years. And so I would like to say, I think I'm a fiscal conservative. I believe that it's a good thing that we look at all the dollars we have, make sure we're spending them expediently. If we have excesses, we can reevaluate. But I do think we need to do it expediently so that we can get back to the discussion of keeping Jefferson Parish not just adequately drained, but being proactive to do those projects that we don't have the funding for, but know we need to have done. I don't want to just be playing catch-up. I don't want to do that. We've seen that damage to our parish. You want to be ahead of the game when it comes to drainage. And I appreciate Mitch Terrio, again, laying out all of those projects that we know that we need. And so for this interim period, we will need to juggle. I know in my district, I will have to look at some projects that aren't as urgent and take money from them and move that money to the projects that are most urgent. So it's really triaging, and that to me is not the best way to do things. So again, we'll do this evaluation of the other millage departments, see if we have any excesses that could be reauthorized by voters. But as a council, I do think we need to do it expediently so that we get back to the voters that are dependent on us for protecting their homes and draining our parish properly.
One thing I wanted to look at, and I had an opportunity to pull up the presentation that the administration did when you all were going around to the civic associations, and it's still online, and it has on here 6.0 mills. That was the presentation, and it's still online right now. It's still on the parish website, and it's still on Times-Picayune website online. I don't understand where we.
All the material had 6.0 mils. The ballot language was at 6.0 mils. We feel that we did a good job of educating the public and getting out in front of this initiative at the 6 mils. But thank you for bringing that up.
I have something to say.
All right, I'm going to go to Councilman Johnson, then Councilwoman Lee. Councilwoman.
I want to applaud. I remember, Keith, we saw you at a lot of the meetings. And I think we all, on the council side and the administration side, probably before we put this on the ballot, maybe need to decide what we're going to do. The issue is extremely confusing, as it is. We all know. You come up for a millage every 10 years or so, then you have a property valuation that the assessor does in the middle, and then half the time we're using the word rollback when it really isn't a rollback. We're going out and saying that it's not a new tax, but if people's bill goes up, to that person, it's a new tax, even though it might have been authorized at that level for a very, very long time. So I think that doesn't help our situation that we're in now, that the language is very, very confusing, and I think all of us need to really set to the public. It was a previously authorized millage that we're going out for. If your property increased, you might have a bigger bill at the end of the day. It's not a new tax, but you might pay more. And we actually have to go that extra step when we explain to the people so we don't all find ourselves in this situation again. But it is a very, very confusing issue. My concern is if we tell people it's not a new tax and then their bill goes up at the end of the year, we all needed to do a better job at explaining that it's not a new tax. It was a previously authorized millage amount. But because your property increased, you might pay more at the end of the year.
And Councilman, good point. And for clarification, this is nothing new to Jefferson Parish. I mean, this has been going on for decades. Again, that's what my confusion was, why it all of a sudden became a problem, because I know many of you have voted on millages over the past 10 years since y'all have served on your tenure in these positions or previous positions. So we didn't do anything different than has ever been done before in Jefferson Parish, just to clarify that.
And I can appreciate that, and we all know we lost some millage elections in the most recent couple years, and there was a concern that this might not pass at the way it was at that time, and that the business community was very concerned about that, approached many of us with that concern that where would we be if the whole thing didn't pass. So many of us were like, let's get what we have and make the commitment that we're only going to collect what we're collecting now to make sure we kept that. And those were many of the conversations that I had with the business community, along with many of my colleagues as well.
And I agree with you, and I think that was magnified by the fact that the legislature had raised sales tax to 10%. Exactly. So that was, another issue that was weighing on the thought process. Any other comment? Oh, Councilman Johnson.
What I was going to say was just Parish President Yenni just said in 2007, when these taxes came for renewal, they were voted on, and they was at 6 and 10 was recreation. So 10 years later, we voted on it, and it went back to 6 and 10 with recreation. The 6 mills for drainage and 10 for recreation. It's been history, like the parish president said, that every 10 years when we renew a millage, it always goes back to the original millage. The majority of these people up here voted for raising it back to the mill that it was at. And when Mr. Roberts came to the council meeting, when we voted on the rollback, he gave us an amendment right before the council meeting. And I knew recreation was voted on just 2 or 3 months before that, and the people voted on 10 mills. I couldn't remember that drainage was the other one that was voted on by the citizens, and that was rolled back up to 6 mills. So when we voted on, I voted against the drainage rolling it back to 6 because I was confused, because I did not know that that was the one we just voted on 2 months ago to raise it back to 6. So I felt we should have gone back to 6. It's done historically through the decades of this parish's existence. They've always gone back to where it was at. And I don't understand why we rolled it back to 4.64. There's a reason. I don't know the reason. But they're $45 million, and I have a part of my district that people got their backyard falling back into the canal. I'd say the same thing Jennifer has. I have it in my district to the Soniac Canal. I got people's yard falling into the canal, their backyard. So I understand where she's coming from over there on the Bonneville Canal and the other canals they have in their district. So, but I know the historical vote has always been to roll it back up to where it was originally at. Thank you.
Councilman Johnson, I'll end on this note in saying that I would happen to agree with you in that regard. I think where the concern is coming in now is that, one, what I stated earlier, we need to do a fiscal review as to where we are financially as a whole in the parish. The second thing is that since 2005, people's homeowners insurance have doubled and tripled. And typically, property tax is part of the escrow along with homeowners insurance, and it's getting to a point in time where it's going to become unaffordable for some people, and that's what the concern is when you speak to those in the real estate industry, because they will tell you that the escrow account and the cost associated with the escrow in some cases is equaling what the principal and interest payment is on a home. And, that's the challenge that we face now in this post-hurricane era when you could get a homeowner's policy in 2003 for $1,300 and now you're paying $5,000 with a deductible of 20% if we have a hurricane. So, it's a balance. And I'm not against looking at it at 6. I do believe that we need to look at where we stand overall with all the millages that we're currently collecting and make sure that we have them prioritized correctly. And if we come back and determine that that's the case, then I personally am committed to reevaluating the situation at that time. But I think the approach that Councilwoman Lee Shang has on the table that we've already voted on is probably the most prudent approach to take.
You answered my question is what was the reason for rolling it back to 4.64? Why did you amend the
because that would keep the amount that was billed on the tax bill at the exact amount that was previously collected.
I understand that, but why would you all of a sudden pick these 2 millages?
Because
for history, for decades.
Because I think
we voted to roll it back to the original millage.
First of all, like I just said, we're dealing in a different environment where escrows are growing, and there's a concern about that and the costs associated with it. And if we want to go back to where we were a year ago in the environment that we were faced and the questions that we did not know the answers to as to whether or not in that environment we were going to be able to get these things passed or not, I think that was a concern for everybody at that time.
Councilman, if I can just add, because you did mention insurance, and I think it's something important to note considering that was brought up. I agree with everything we've talked about this morning, but part of what our residents in Jefferson Parish will enjoy is they should see their insurance costing them less because we will have new flood maps that reflect the drainage improvements that we as a parish have made. And so making sure that we stay aggressive on our drainage improvements results in a savings to our homeowners on those insurance rates. So again, it's all part of an issue that we're obviously looking at. We will look at it expediently, but that's important for us to remember too because that saves it.
I don't disagree at all. And when we get the answers as to how we've gone from $400 million in investments to over $800 million in investments and know whether or not there's other means. And we may have some areas where we have dedicated revenue being collected that we're collecting too much.
90% of it's dedicated revenue.
And
we took away from the lighting to fund the IG a few years back when the citizens voted on it, and now we're coming up and saying we don't have enough money to fund the lighting system.
I haven't heard anybody say that we don't have enough money to fund the lighting system. There have been more lighting projects in the last 3 or 4 years. Well, are you saying we don't need the IG?
I never said that.
Okay.
Don't put words in my mouth, Mr.
Well, you're saying that's how we fund it.
We took a millage and they divided up from lighting to fund the IG. Maybe we need to put the vote to the people to fund the IG on his own millage and not mess with the lighting.
Well, first of all, any rededication that this parish would propose, just like the IG, would have to go to the voters for approval.
Never said that.
We don't have the ability to change dedicated funds on our own. So if and I believe you're going to have an appointment on this committee just like everybody else is, if the committee comes back and says there are no ways to lower certain things or raise other things, then at that point in time we'll evaluate it at that time. But if the committee comes back and makes a recommendation and we decide we want to go forward with it, then the process from that point forward is to put it on the ballot and the voters would have to rededicate it. There was a rededication of funds back in 2004 when we had to determine how to fund the ongoing cost of the Performing Arts Center and where that money would come from. And then Parish President Broussard at the time put a package together that was then presented to the public to reduce some of the collections in some areas, raise it in others, stay revenue neutral, and that's how the funding came about in order to cover the cost of the Performing Arts Center on an annual basis. So point being is I think, and I don't want to speak for Councilwoman Lee Sheng, but what we're trying to say is let's look at that. We may get the answers back that say there isn't, okay? But I do know that when I look at charts, that on average, the parish's surplus accounts, meaning investment accounts, are increasing by $25 million a year.
Now, a lot of that is due to one-time funding. We got through FEMA. FEMA forgave the loans, so there is a swell, and it depends at the time you look at it. Of course, we're going to be...
Well, there's always an up when you collect it and a down as you spend it out, but the bottom numbers continue to increase.
I think this committee is going to be very revealing.
Well, I think it's right, and it's going to put to rest the issues as to whether or not certain things are overfunded or not. And I think once we get past that point, we can make an educated decision.
Mr. Chairman,
Let me say this
we'll
also. I'm sorry.
We all, just to refresh everyone's memory, every council member will have an appointment to this committee. The parish president will get 2 appointments to the committee because that sort of mimicked the charter advisory board that we had set up. Our business groups and our civic associations will also, on the East Bank and West Bank, will get an appointment. And our office will work on that this next week into contacting everyone. And so if we can all ourselves put an appointment on that committee, we can get that meeting going absolutely before the holidays. So we can start working on that as soon as possible.
I just want to mention to Councilman Roberts that I do know how government works, and you're telling me how it's got to go to voters, people on these millage.
I'm saying that for the benefit of the public. I'm saying that for the benefit of the public. I don't want the public watching the meeting sit here and think that we can make these decisions arbitrarily without them having input to the process. So that was no disrespect to your knowledge of the workings, but for anybody who may be tuning in, they may not realize that a dedicated revenue, just as you said, can't be undedicated without their vote.
And Councilman Johnson, I recall being in the district, many of our public works projects are the ones that are probably, I think, underfunded. I know you answer constituent calls, and your answer has to be to them, there's no funding in the budget, Councilwoman Van Rankin. I had to make those calls. It's terrible calls to make. So my inkling is that the public works side is, if anything needs a little bit more millage to be pulled from other areas, it's on the public works side. And I think probably from the phone calls that we have, and I know you have sewage issues in your district as well, that is what my gut feeling is, what this committee might find.
My biggest call is drainage. That's my biggest, and I think everybody up here, it's their biggest call is drainage.
It is, but I have to say this too. Drainage is an issue, and I know you were around in 95 when they had the bad flood, okay? We are so much improved from that point in time. And other than the hiccup in 2005 when the pumps were turned off, I'm not aware of any significant home or structure flooding that has occurred in this parish since that time. And we've been tested, because when you go back and look at some of these torrential rainfall events that we've had over the last decade, it's pushed the limits, but guess what? We've responded to it, and we've had occasional instances where you may have a few circumstances where there's flooding, and I'm referring to rain flooding, not coastal tidal surge flooding. But I don't think we're ever going to get to a point, too, where the expectation can be that you're not going to have a water pond in the street, okay? Because that's how the drainage system is designed. That's what it's supposed to do. And when you have a long period, when you have a period or a short period of very heavy rainfall, we're going to expect that the water is going to be in the street. And we're going to get the calls and complaints about that. But the way the system is designed is in order to turn that street into a stream so that it holds the water away from the structure. And I don't think we'll ever be able to ensure everyone, even during every rain event, that the street's going to stay dry. That's just impossible to do. But the circumstances you all were referring to with the canals falling into the bank, that's an issue that's got to be addressed. I mean, there's no question. Because on top of that, what does it do when that falls into the canal and creates an impediment for the canal and its ability to drain the water out for the other areas that rely on that water as outfall? So.
Calls from residents at home. I have gotten videos from people who have sent them to me recently, and it is beyond just the ponding in the street. I have a video from a lady who literally the water is up to her knees. So again, we do appreciate that there are some situations that we have to keep on top of, and they should be our next improvements to be made.
Right. But the parish overall, I have to say, in the last 20 years has done a hell of a job with the sealer money and getting these outfall canals dug deeper, widened, and our ability to be able to get water out is much, much better than it was at one point in time, for sure. Are there any other discussion as it relates to? Okay. And I'm glad, Councilman Johnson, you made that point. I'm not by any means suggesting you didn't realize the dedication. I was doing that for the benefit of the public to understand that. I think we still have to move to cancel, Madam Clerk. Is that right? Okay, moved by Councilman Van Vanken, second by Councilman Roberts. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Brings